Can all of you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to use this large microphone over here. I was born in Walla Walla in the 1940s, and I can say what year. My grandfather came to Walla Walla in 1905. And shortly thereafter, his wife came, and shortly after that, his parents came and settled and became established in the town. My father was Dave Frank, son of Johann Conrad Frank, my grandfather. And close to 1984, he started having medical issues and ended up having a stroke. At the time, I was working in Portland, and it was really hard for me to go to Walla Walla really quickly and consistently to see him. But my aunt Elaine, my dad's younger sister, took care of him for quite a long time. She visited the recuperative home that he was in. Unfortunately, he had a couple more strokes, and he would get better, and then more strokes. So I really appreciated all the work that she did with me absent, being able to go in and see him all the time, since she lived in the same town. Unfortunately, he passed away. It was about 1984, 1985, and Elaine all this time had been doing the work of village coordinator for Kautz for quite a long time. She had been she'd been interviewing people all over the U.S., especially in Montana, where there were a lot of cousins, many towns in Montana, and we settled in the Walla Walla area. She got information from them. She spent quite a bit of time in Montana going to churches and Xeroxing records, which is probably a no-no today, but she was able to create a database of typically Kautz people who were growing up in the Laurel, especially Laurel and Billings area. My grandfather would travel by train carrying fruit to Laurel, Billings, and see his cousins. And both clans were pretty close to each other. So let me go up the screen here. You can see we probably don't have any village coordinators here. We do have a number of them within the group. Steve Schreiber, he's been a past president. His village is Norka. Nekrasovo is the Russian name. Roger Burbank, I think he's a co-coordinator for Norka. I'm including Brent Mai because he was here for a long time. I'm not sure if he's currently a member, still a member of our organization.
Jim, is he?
I think so.
No?
I think so.
Is he? Okay. He's from Kratska. His ancestors are from Kratchna and the daughter village of Arenfeld. Sherry Bittman-Stahl, Brunenthal.
Is she still active? Is she still active?
Who's that?
Sherry Stahl?
I haven't heard from her for quite a while, but I think I just got a Facebook request from her to become a friend, so hopeful to be getting back with her. Leanne Schlager, New Denoff, and then Tanya Shell, she's an honorary member of the group. believe she's living in Germany now, having gotten married, and she has a child. Her village was Seawall, and you could walk from Kautz to Seawall really easily. You just have to walk through the sunflower plants, all the sunflowers, because they were raising a whole lot of sunflowers in Russia, and still are. Seawall had a neighboring village of Rothhamel, and Kautz had a neighboring village of Dietl. Anybody heard of Dietl? I have a friend up in Kent area. Her name is Karen Boughton, and she and I worked quite closely together on Dietl genealogy. I've transcribed a bunch of Dietl church records for her and helped her with her database. We happened to meet at a coin show up in Tukwila. I told her I was going up for that, and she said, well, I'm going to come over and talk to you, and we worked out the details of what we were both interested in, and we've been lifelong friends ever since. So Dietl was a larger village. Kautz was bulldozed from 1961 to 1964, so nothing remains of the village. So I'm spending 30-some years of my life on a piece of dirt it's basically got mounds where the houses used to be, and it no longer exists. But from those mounds, you can see Dietl, and there were a lot of marriages between the two towns. So, according to HSGR, there are 174 villages that don't have a village coordinator. So if anybody wants to work on that, becoming a new village coordinator. Anybody want to become a new village coordinator?
How many total villages were there in the Volga area?
That's a good question.
I thought there were 104 in Volga.
I'd have to check on that. There were a lot fewer on the western side of the Volga than on the east. In the west, they call it the Berg site, or the hilly side, And on the eastern side, they called it the Wiesen site, or the meadow side. There are a lot more villages on the meadow side. Me as a village coordinator, we're all just individuals. What I'm doing as a village coordinator is totally different than what my aunt did as village coordinator. She was more personable, went out and met families in remote towns throughout the country. Me, I sit down at the computer and I crunch data. And talk to RJ. So different villages have different types of data available. Kautz is very well endowed with records. The Lutheran church records, births, marriages, and deaths. There are a lot of villages that don't have as good of information as Kautz. That being the case, I am missing about 50 years of births that I've not been able to find through the different archives in Russia. And that being the fact, it's hard for me to tie some grown-ups who died with their family. Typically on births, if there are births, the parents will be listed. But On the children, they're listed, the parents are listed, and it's easy to, typically there's high mortality with the children, so there were, all those records are easily comparable from child to parent. But for the older people, one thing they didn't do, one thing you didn't have available to you were the birth records. But you did have the death record when they died, and you could calculate the date of birth from the date of death and the age, which was typically listed in year, the number of years, the number of months, and the number of days. So there are programs out there that can calculate the birth date from the death date. HSGR, I highlighted the top baseline requirements for any village coordinator. You have to be a member with the HSGR, obviously. You'll be the point of contact for everything about your village or villages. Some people have 10 or 20 villages that they work on. Typically there's not a whole lot of work per village. They don't get a lot of calls in a year. So as a VC, you will respond to inquiries. You'll coordinate research. You need to go to the AHSGR conventions if possible. And you need to prepare an annual report for whatever villages you're responsible for. Telling basically what you've done during the year, how many people you talked to, typically how many records you have in your database. Hopefully it's increasing every year. The information below is typically you want to be a representative, you want to be the face of HSGR and put on a good face for people that want to find out about HSGR. You want to share your files with Lincoln, Nebraska. You need to find, I've been trying to find somebody to take over for me, and Dorothy so far said no. Coward.
No record.
It would help if the next generation were more interested in genealogy, maybe as they go into their 40s and 50s, they'll develop an interest. But right now, it's a hard thing to do to keep up with the aging population. Once upon a time. Who wants to talk about Catherine the Great? Okay, I only have one slide for her. Okay, we'll go. This is the map of Volga German colonies. I believe Carl Stump put it out. In red, you'll see the village of Kautz, where it lies in relation to all the other villages, in relation to the Volga. The Berg site, not a whole lot of villages, less than the east side, but you'll see that Kautz, Kratzka, Merkel, and Dietl are pretty much close to each other, within walking distance. Google Earth, I wonder what that means. I changed a couple things around this morning. Google Earth is a free program you can download off the internet. I've created a file that contains all the coordinates of the various villages on both sides of the river. So, who can give me the name of their village?
Norca.
Norca. You go down to Norca. Is that me? The light's getting to me. Norca's up in the north, along with Rome. But you can just click on any of these villages and see a map, an overhead view, satellite view of the village. This one's not too far from Frank. I don't get any indication what's causing that beam. Out of Narca into Frog. You can turn on, you can turn off the street, you can turn on the roads.
That's from?
This is from.
Can you bring up Francoeur?
I can. It's really hard to do though. There it is.
I was there in 1994 with my 84-year-old uncle who escaped from there when he was like 8 years old.
Everybody know what a cooter is?
A cooter?
A cooter.
It's a satellite community.
It's basically a farmstead or a settlement outside the confines of the colony itself.
Why do you think they developed those, or how did those come to be in existence?
I'd say over time that as the villages developed, they ran out of land. So they acquired new land and settled.
There was a policy of giving the farm to the senior boy, or maybe 2 boys or so. And so when there were other siblings who wanted to join the profession, their scooter was structured to handle overflow.
I think they ran out of room in Krotzka, and that's Brent's community, and they ended up, a group of the Krotzka people ended up founding the village of Ehrenfeld on the eastern side of the river.
Are there records from that village?
Yes, I believe so. Now this, these coordinates that I developed, they're all locked into a file. It's called a KMZ file. And anybody who wants it, just write it on the card. And I can just email it to you. So if you have Google Earth, you double click on that KMZ file and it should load up to the point where you can get to any of these villages with a click.
Let's go back to this satellite village. Was that, were they looked down upon, like they were across the tracks, or?
No.
That was just an extension of the family?
Just an extension of the village. not only have I done villages, Volga German villages, I've also done German towns.
Is this current day Google Earth? Or do we know how old that is?
October 12th, 2018. They probably do a rolling update every so often.
Can you zero, is that from?
What's that?
Is that Frank Ruder?
It is.
Can you zero in and see if you can find the old mill?
I don't think that'll look well. I guess we can do it. I'm not sure how you'd tell mill versus any other building.
Such a big structure. That big structure at the bottom is the school, I believe.
In where?
Frank Cooter.
Oh, that's Frank Cooter?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's what.
It's bigger than what I thought.
Yeah, it's much bigger than when I was there.
We go to Germany, what's the ancestral village in Germany? Some people, any idea?
It's where the blue moon lines. Alze, A-L-Z-E.
A-L-Z-A-E?
I-E.
A-L-Z-I-E. I don't see it as far as a lookup town. Have you heard of Aachen? Now we're going into Germany and looking at the villages.
Rendell, R-E-N-D-E-L. Northeast, you know what's east or west of Europe, so it's toward Russia, the east, northeast of Frankfurt.
Spell it again?
Hmm?
Spell it again?
No, Rendell, R-E-N-D-E-L. Near Grossgarten. Near Dinkelsmuir.
R-E-N-D-E-L, huh?
R-E is in Edward, N-D-E-L.
Rendell, Germany.
And then the correct spelling for Alze.
This is Rendell here, it looks like.
Right,
Just a small village.
yeah. The church is where my forefathers were married and,
Have you been there?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
have you?
No.
Been there several times.
A-L-Z-E-Y.
A-L-E-Y.
A-L-Z-E-Y.
Looks like you're in luck. I can get my mouse to work. Town is not on the list, and it's, you can search on it. How about that? There are a lot of pictures taken in that town. Here's one of them. Can you see it? lot of pictures taken. You can type in your own home address and see your home. You can type in somebody else's home address, see where they live. I love Google Earth. Some of the larger towns, you can get down to the street level and go along the road and see people on bicycles. At the time, the picture was loaded. The founding dates, they pretty much passed as far as 250 years. Kautz was founded May the 20th, 1767. So 2017 would have been its 250th anniversary. When we say founding, there are only two families that came into the village in May. A big group came in July. So they were coming from different areas, and not all at once as a big group. Oh, this village is now founded and it has all the people that it's going to get. No. This is sort of a picture of what it might look like. This happens to be in a different country, I think Hungary, but you can imagine people coming in. Houses are either being built, have been built, or have not yet been built. We go down to Kautz. Get an idea of where it stands. Get out of Germany and back into the Moab area. And you can see there's nothing there. As opposed to Dietl next door. You see the difference between Kautz and Dietl. You go out a little bit more here. You can see where Seawald is, just not too far from Kautz, south of Dietl and Rothavel. Seawald and Rothavel were Catholic. All the other ones I've been talking about, they're Lutheran. Merkel is not too far to the east. Kratska, that's Brett Lyons village. Village of Kautz, as you can see, May 20th, 1767, the Kautz and Neubauer families came to Kautz and founded the village. George Jacob Kautz, he was the mayor of Ungstein, Germany, and he became mayor of Kautz. And he was about the only person, except for the Neubauers, in that village for 2 months. I passed the map of Kautz around. A lot of people worked on that map, most of them from Montana. George Schreiner, Alexander Frank, Henry Frank, and Wilhelm Frank. Wilhelm was my grandfather's youngest brother. Picture.
Did you make the maps in from memory or from?
From memory.
Yeah.
Especially my great uncle. Great uncle?
Yeah, Bill.
Bill Frank. He died 1986, but by that time they had developed the map of Kautz pretty well, and he came from Kautz, so he was very familiar with the village, its layout, and the different families that populated the different houses. A lot of those are documented. And there was more than just the names.
It was pretty precious.
There were relationships, whose relation to who was in this house versus this house. And it was pretty interesting.
Was your Frank family related to the Frank family that founded Frank?
Not that I've heard. But there was a lot of travel amongst the villages too. This is a picture of downtown Kautz. About 1902, I colorized it. It was a different village, just a black and white photo before. Across the street is one of the Frank stores in town. You see a big gate, which I guess keeps robberies down. And they lived in the house next door, I believe.
Would Kautz have been a wealthier village compared to others, or is this
Some others,
real
some not.
real standard?
The Franks and the Norcans, they would have been probably the wealthiest. Kautz did have a couple of mills, I believe the Sunflower Mill and a couple of others. Kautz today, that's what it looks like. Bare open ground and mound after mound after mound.
Aren't those mounds where cemeteries were?
That's where houses used to be.
Really?
What did they do, build the earth up under the house?
So you just covered up with dirt.
They bulldozed them in 1961, 1964.
So that makes the mound, the bulldozed building is the mound.
Right.
Okay.
My aunt,
They've also they put dirt on the roof for insulation.
Right.
So it would be a foot or so of dirt
right,
above that.
Oh, okay.
my aunt Elaine went in 1991 with cousins from Russia. I think it took them 18 hours to drive from Kimry, was it, down to Kautz.
Just north of Moscow, I
Yeah.
forgot the name, yeah.
But it took 18 hours.
Yeah.
I think it was on semi-good ground too. And they get there and they have the map. They've got the same map as what you have, maybe a little bit larger. And just, here's the main street, okay. My grandfather, or my father's house was 5 houses down. So they're going house, 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 and that can't be right. The reason was they have house, what do you call it?
The summer kitchen?
Summer kitchen.
Yeah.
House, summer kitchen, house, summer kitchen. So they were off by a factor of 2 in determining the correct house. She finally found the house, and we have a picture of her somewhere. This is my, can you see the cursor?
Yeah.
It's my great-grandfather, born 1856. His name was Johann Conrad Frank. Problem with genealogy, here's another Johann Conrad Frank, his son, my grandfather, and Eva Elizabeth Schreiner. So husband, wife, grandfather, and I believe they were related. Grandma, I believe he is. There's the same picture colorized.
It's
Is
really
it colored?
cool.
Huh?
It's really cool.
Yes.
It comes out okay? I can't see the screen. Yeah.
Until he starts making a move. Or blinking.
They all have that same hairstylist.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
The software it's a website that I go to. It's called MyHeritage. One word. And you just, if you have a file, picture, a group picture of people, you can go to MyHeritage and import it into the screen, and it will colorize the picture for you. Then you can either screen scrape it or save it as your own. Some colors come out a little bit weird, but you can see for this one, it's pretty accurate.
Is Brett Nye still doing his tours?
You know, I've got to call out to him to find out, and I haven't heard back.
With all the political mess, no, it was canceled last year because of diplomats being pulled out of the country. No diplomats, no security for visitors. And there's nothing posted for this year, and given what's happening in Ukraine, it's unlikely.
Yeah. I would be hesitant going there,
When was the last year that he went?
Probably 19.
19, I think. I think 20 was the first cancellations, right? That's the year of COVID, right? Yeah, so 2019.
I went in 2016.
17?
Hmm?
We went in 17.
You didn't go with me, did you?
If you went in 16 and we went in 17, probably not.
Okay. Yeah, I went 1 year before the 250th anniversary. As did Doug over here,
And Carol.
and Carol. Got a fine picture of us, group photos. The person on the left here, my great-grandfather, he was born 1856. Johann Conrad Frank, we called him the judge because he was a circuit court judge. Typically running out of Deedle, I think was his main office. He was given that title and job because he, I believe in the Russian military, he learned Russian and he knew German, so he was a good interface person. 1923, this is what he looked like after he came to the United States.
So did he continue his career here?
No,
He went into farming.
he went into retirement.
Oh, okay.
What year did he come to the States?
I'd have to look that up. Do you recall?
What was the question?
What year did he come to the States?
They came with Uncle Bill, but I don't remember, 1916 maybe, or?
Yeah, it was well after my grandfather and grandmother. So my great-grandfather and my grandfather, apparently he was out working west of Walla Walla, and at that time you could stand out near the tracks and wave the train down to be able to get on the train. That would take him back into Walla Walla. Well, he knew his dad was coming, and he ended up getting on the train. And seeing his father didn't recognize him. It's been a couple of years. And he sat beside him and said, "Father, don't you know me?" And for a week or two, I think, afterwards, they had parties. The parents were there.
I have a question
Uh-huh.
about some of these villages and places that you're referring to.
Yes,
Um,
can you open
Germans don't live there.
Is that
Germans don't live there.
Where?
No.
only a couple?
Only a couple of towns or a couple of Germans?
A couple of people that moved back into either their village or a neighboring village,
Just like when we were there. Yeah, I get it.
but they're mainly occupied by Russians.
Yeah.
Michael,
Yes,
after
Later.
1956 and 57, the Russians did not allow the German people to move back into their villages. They said, no, we have put you out of here, because we went, I don't remember what year we went in 93 to Germany, and earlier than that, we went with Bill and Thelma Wiest to the Volga area.
yeah,
And Saratov and stuff. And they said after 1956, 57, the Russians would not allow any of the German people to move back to their villages. They said no. They took the scoops and they pushed all the tombstones into big piles in the cemetery.
I know of a couple of people who have moved back.
Yeah, and we saw some that we recognized, some tombstones that were in the piles in Norca
These are active
and in
people.
Bidek.
I think Tanya Shell had an aunt
Yeah.
in Seawall. It's very uncommon for Germans to be allowed to go back into the village, especially their village of origin.
Well, a few years ago, we were in Market, and there was, out in the country, remember that? In the church, and there was one lady that was of German heritage, but she was married to a Russian man and had Russian kids, and
Therefore, she was allowed.
yeah, I just thought that was very interesting.
On our tour, we did find a couple of houses where they knew ahead of time that the person was German.
There are very few Germans there.
Yeah. Mila, everybody know Mila Reknikov?
Yes.
She was conversing with some of the Germans in some of those villages.
Okay.
But there were very few people. My grandfather, as a young man, his family, that's the oldest son, Bill, my dad, and Elaine. She hadn't been born by the time the big picture was taken. And there's the family, Grandpa and Grandma on the left, Bill, Rose, who is Dorothy's mother, Bert, Al, my dad, George, and Elaine. So a pretty big family. A couple of children died at an early age. His 50th wedding anniversary. They were married in 1902, right after Christmas, with at least 8 other couples at the same time. That was typically the pattern. These pastors didn't get around to every village all the time, so the couples would wait and then all get married at the same time.
And they typically did it in the winter,
In the winter
when they
time.
weren't out working,
Right.
in fields.
That's Elaine at her house. And those are some of the volumes of information that she put out, Our People from Kautz. She put out 10 volumes. And she had a basement with tables, and it was all paper, front and back, copied, bound, and after her death in 2001, I said, to heck with that, I don't have enough room in my house for all that. So I copied them all the pages, and then put them into electronic format. So that you could use it as a website, even though it might be on your computer, or it might be on a CD or DVD. It's something I could mail out to people, and they could have these volumes and go through. In the process, I added the last volume, which is due to the fact that she had 3 volumes of volume 3. She actually had 10 volumes, and mine was the 11th. I called it volume 9. It's currently got 315 pages. So I don't want to keep making new volumes. Stick with the one that I know. So she interviewed her dad while he was alive. He died in '59. A lot of taped interviews with her uncle, who lived to be a ripe old age. She had a lot of people to interview in Walla Walla. She did a lot of Xeroxing of church records in Montana and Walla Walla. A lot of interviews across the country. She was heavily into AHSGR, attending the conventions and speaking at quite a few of them. A lot of her information came from commissioned work done by Dr. Clement. She got about 18 family group charts, and she was paying pretty good money at the time to get those before Pleva started getting behind on everything. She worked with a company called Lineages, who was able to go out and find the original German town that our Frank came from. The problem way back then was you have Germans coming into Russia and they have to be enumerated. So you've got Russians speaking, you have Germans speaking to Russian enumerators, and these Russian enumerators are writing down phonetically information like, where did you come from? But they're writing in the Cyrillic. So to be able to get that town of origin back to the originating German town was pretty difficult. In Lineages, we had, I think, 4 or 5 different possible names of villages that what turned out to be Shrisheim. We finally found it was Shrisheim. Was the German town of origin of the first Frank.
She was a remarkable person, and really her work and Doris Evans and maybe 1 or 2 others were the foundation for the entire program that's evolved from those early days.
I was around Elaine when she could get 2 random people together who were related and tell them, without a computer, how they were related, and how they might be related 2 different ways or 3. And it took a computer. It still takes a computer for me to figure that out. These are the charts that Pleva produced, or his wife produced. Frank, Frickel, Fuchs, Glockenhammer, Granwall, Hart, Hermany, Klein, Canal, Michael, Neubauer, Ostwald, Pope, Ruder, Reel, Schreiner, Schumann, Staley, and Weber. lineages found that the town of Schriesheim was located within walking distance of Heidelberg. This is Heidelberg Old Town, across the Neckar River from, actually you go around, oops. You go across the river, down and around this hill, and you go a couple of kilometers and there's Schriesheim. Schriesheim is that little village with the Strahlenberg Castle, the ruins up on top of the hill, and a lot of great producing areas on the hill.
It looks like the Frankenstein castle
Yeah,
after it was burned.
Picturesque.
I've been up to the top of the top of that, and it's very rickety. I think it's original. The house in the center was a Frank house. I'm not sure if it was the only Frank house. But get a different view of the town this way.
When were you there?
I'll have to think about it. I'm getting old. It was after 91. This church here is the Catholic church. Within a block or two of the Lutheran church. Family in Schriesheim owns the Gestatt Frank restaurant. And there's a story about how Elaine and I think it was George and others knocked on the back door and they compared notes on genealogy and found out their charts were the same. From the first recorded Frank Andrus, born in 1484 in Schriesheim, we have the lineage all the way down to me.
How many generations is
I think about 15, and like 5 or so from Johann Conrad, David, George, Frank, Philip, Johann Philip. It's 5 or 6 back to the original Frank relative.
Michael, you have 19 right there. You have 10 up to the white line, and then you have.
I could work
you have
as fast
19
as
right
you
there.
have to recount, so, no. I've had DNA taken through Ancestry. Then they told me I wasn't German. I was Greek and a couple of other things. So I decided to go to 23andMe, and they made me German again. And then Ancestry came back and said, "You're German." I'm documented German, so I should be German.
You look German.
Thank you. I think. Through the DNA that I've taken, I'm related to about 1,500 people. Related to Schriesheim. And we're not necessarily related to this Johann Philipp Frank only. I'm related to these other 1,400 and some because their families married into the Franks up and down the ladder. Newer versus older. they're related to other Franks that didn't go to Russia.
If you sit here, your back will get work.
I don't know how this nitro came up, but it's been doing it. So descendants of Andreas Frank, born 1484. It's just one family from Kautz. These are the descendants. I've only begun. What's worse is the Genealogy Report. Oh, I did it again. You look at this one, and this is 1,031 pages, but it includes a lot of verbiage, obituaries and such. You're going through the records. Going through the records, here is a I can't read it very well. But there was a marriage. It tells where the marriage record was found. That particular marriage, 1892, marriage number 7. Same for births and deaths. You could follow the records throughout. If you needed to go back and look at whether I made a mistake on translation. These all go into notes. So any record that I translated goes into the notes as far as what the source of the document is. Lane's first computer, shortly after my dad's death. She had an Apple IIe. We started putting on software, AppleWorks, and Family Roots, which was a genealogy program. There she is, standing on the mound of her father in Kautz. She had an audio that she put out indicating that she was one of the first people allowed on a private visa instead of a tourist visa. A lot of people there had not seen Americans before. She brought back soil from the family home and Some were spread out over the graves of her parents. Family reunions in Walla Walla, some bigger than others. This is just my grandfather's family. Johann Conrad Frank, 1977, 1982, and there were more after that. The family from Russia that ended up taking her to Kautz. I don't know how this got in here, but it's a lot of towns in the Billings, Laurel area had relatives related to Frank. For speaking at an AHSGR convention, posthumous award presented to her.
Do you still communicate with Karen Yost?
Yes.
She's still alive?
Oh yeah, I got a Christmas card from her. I'm gonna go really quickly through these pictures, old pictures taken in Kautz. Different families. These were from Norca, I think. They were married in Norca, where they were born. Occupations. This one was in Laurel, Montana, working for the railroad. They're called carmen, rail cars. They found jobs in the White House Crawford in Walla Walla, doing milling of wood. In Walla Walla, some of the Volga Germans worked for the railroad, Northern Pacific. They came, they didn't know a speck of English, so they rely on somebody who'd come before them from the Volga, and then they do the translation on what needed to be done on a day-to-day basis until they learned the language. Quite a few grocery stores. I think the Hills were one competitor. This is one Frank grocery store. My grandfather was in the contracting, general contractors, and a number of sons worked for the business. Back in Montana, sugar beets was a thing. A lot of people worked in sugar beets. Picture of the band in Kautz. These are the volumes that Elaine put out, 1 through 8. Then I added 9 and made it electronic. So it took her days to create paper volumes I can do in like 10 minutes. And just create a DVD or a CD for people. The Kautz database currently has 37,192 people, 11,000 marriages, and it's taken quite a bit of time to get all that together. If somebody can write me and tell me who they are. If I can find them in the database, I can tell tell them how I'm related to them within a couple seconds. In converting from paper to electronic, I used HTML, hypertext markup language. A sample is given here. Basically wrap HTML commands around names, text, pictures, whatever. And this is what it comes out like. So I acquired the copies at Concordia of Kautz and Merkel Lutheran records. I translated the Kautz records, and I'll show you that here shortly. I developed an Excel spreadsheet before I started entering into the genealogical database. This is sorted in such a way as I entered the information. So I started with births. The year is 1835. Didn't have many that year, but as you can see, I'm going to go a full screen at a time. A lot of information went in, and a lot of it was undecipherable without close scrutiny. And, some of it you could probably consider hand scratching, but we figured it out. Towards the end, towards later, it was written in Cyrillic. And these church records after that were listed in Cyrillic and German, side by side. So then you could say, oh, Wilhelm, this is how they write in Cyrillic, and create a database of all the first and last names, so you could figure out who was who. We get down to marriages to be able to sort the person, sort the person. Let's go back to births. There's the person. There's the father. There's the mother. For marriages, we had to put the husband in as primary, and then we put the wife in as primary. So basically 2 records per marriage, so that the women would sort down with everybody else. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to associate them with anybody. This is in recording sequence, so I'm going to highlight everything, go up and sort. We'll do a custom sort based on M instead of A, the column M. You can see what happens now. We have all Johann George Schreiner's and Eva Elizabeth Schreiner, their whole family listed. So you're seeing the family groups that now, you can see the whole family, all the births, marriages, and deaths happening to each family, which you could then enter into a genealogical database. Like I said before, deaths of older individuals didn't show birth dates, so you had to calculate that.
So does each village coordinator create their own tools, or are you all uniform and the same tools you're using?
It's all open.
It's all, okay.
You use what works best for you.
It's-
There's really no set formula. Nobody's gonna come in and say, hey, you're doing this wrong, and you're doing it the way you're doing it.
And then once you decide, when you do retire, you're handing it over to a next coordinator. If there isn't another coordinator, does the national organization then?
It goes to Lincoln.
It stays with them? Gotcha.
Counts names and surnames. From the records, I was able to go through and look up the Cyrillic version of like a Wilhelm. There's Wilhelm. There's Samuel. There's Simon. A lot of work put into this. Then you're into the surnames.
So is that an image of the Cyrillic word, or did you
It's
go out?
it's an image off of the direct record.
Oh, gotcha.
Sometimes you put 2 or 3 in because the handwriting was different, a little bit different from one to another. But this was really invaluable in the determination of what the names actually meant. It wasn't so bad in the later years where Cyrillic and German were used because they were written right next to each other. The person's name and the parents' names were written in both languages. Here's a favorite one, causes of death. My favorite cousin, Dorothy Robinson Brandner, transcribed German causes of death to English from these death records. And what a fine job you did.
I had lots of help from the internet.
Okay. You recognize the picture?
Oh, yeah, Wolport.
Where is that record? There they are, written in German and the English translation. I had different tables I used to help me with some of the, especially the month names. After a while, you get to know what a February looks like, or what an August looks like. Pretty much every village that was created was groups that went out and surveyed the land, topological surveys, typically from the Russian military would go out and you compare Frank, this topological military map, to the actual village. You
And
see-
was that done before
Before
the
they went
initial
out.
settlers went in?
Yeah. These are some of the different military maps for each village. Norca, it looks like a submarine. There it looks a little like a submarine. A lot of them were easy to spot when I was going in and building coordinates because you had a river running through. You could follow the river on both the Google map and the military maps. Merkel, it's a work in progress. I have some records, but not even 20% of what I have for Kautz. And I took over from Darryl Kautz. He had a dispute with HSGR, so he just quit. He had put out a couple of big volumes of Merkel information, and lives in Kansas City, and I've tried reaching him tens of times over the years, over the decades, and no response. This KMZ file, it'll be just write on a piece of paper that you want the KMZ file, give me your email address, and I'll see to it that you get it. From those coordinates, I was able to build mileage tables. You think of the old gas stations back in the 50s. How far is it from Walla Walla to Spokane, from Kent to Middleton, Kent to whatever? And you can just work down and find that out. This is the one for the Berg site. So you go from Bauer to Fidak is 34 miles. Not only do you see miles, you can see it in kilometers. And you can see it in versts, which is the Russian mileage. Method. If anybody wants these 2 units, one for the Berg site, one for the Wiesen site, just let me know and I'll email it to you. Like Carol was saying, I was newsletter editor for 5 years, and I had a lot of help. This gentleman over here, Mr. Holstein, he was one of my main proofreaders, and he found a lot of errors.
Not too many.
What?
Not too many.
More than what my spell check could figure out. A lot of people involved in the publication and the distribution of these newsletters. I took all the known Kautz deaths, about 3,500, and created a virtual Kautz cemetery and find a grave. I don't know if anybody's ever done something like that. It's one screen, the other screen looks like that. Infant mortality in Kautz was pretty high, as you can see from the graph. Less than 1 year old, 947 deaths out of 3,400. And 1 year old, quite a bit less, but still over 400. I built like many other village coordinators, a trifold display for the conventions. Virtually every village had a trifold display. I spent several years volunteering to help village coordinators with their annual reports. So I would edit them for spelling, grammar, and clarity. Sometimes they didn't, I'm not sure, but I'm sure some of the times they didn't recognize what they had previously written. They left a lot of dangling participles, which that was my nemesis. Like I said, I used my heritage to colorize black and white photos. The animations are another part of my heritage, which allows you to take a photograph and animate it. Anybody familiar with animation? It's what?
Spooky.
Spooky?
I was reminded that it's very Harry Potter-ish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you look back at this picture, and the person on the left, my great-grandfather, is now animated. You have a problem with that? A lot of people say it's creepy, but
He's pretty good with the video.
It's amazing.
It's a form of artificial intelligence, and that's called predictive modeling. When they're making a static photo, A be colored and then come to life.
Yeah.
It's computer predicting what the
I
face
just
is
lost
like,
my-
what the shadows would look like,
Yeah, just
the
feeling
little muscles that make the eyes twitch.
I used to live with my great-grandfather that had a really long beard and a beautiful beard.
There we go.
Yeah.
So his head's moving, but his beard is just staying static. Kind of funny.
It takes tons of resource on the computer. I mean, you're getting up in the teraflops to do the even just a little bit like
I
that.
can in about 10 maybe. This is his wife. This is my grandfather. What are you shaking your head for? This is your mother.
Nice looking lady.
What's that?
Nice looking lady. Brought her back to life.
Is that creepy out?
I even have a painting taken from that photograph. That's all in blues, shades of blue.
Uh-huh.
It's a very, it's variations of it in our family. She must have really liked that one.
Elaine visited the villages in 1991 and produced 2 VHS tapes, pretty full, which I converted to digital. The Bings, Dan and Pat, visited Kautz in 2007. I visited in 2016. The tour that Carol and I the tour that we took was pretty substantial. It involved a lot of villages, so being more villages, we had less time to spend in each village. There's me in Kautz. We're still growing apple pear hybrids on the site there, and a lot of sunflowers. There's one of the trees bearing fruit in Kautz, even though it's a destroyed village. They went into a root cellar that's still intact. I wasn't about to get down there, not knowing what kind of animals are down there. Tanya Shell, she's the niece of Vera Nikishina, who accompanied us on many of the village tours. She arranged for dancers at Cernovsk when we came back 10 o'clock at night from being in the villages.
Is Nikishima a Japanese name?
I don't think so. Well, it could be, but
Sounds like it.
the genealogical software I use is Family Tree Maker, and it's version 2006. When they started putting bells and whistles on it, it became much harder to use. More often than not, I received a lot more information from people calling in to me and wanting information than I ended up giving to them because they're closest to the family and they have more records and everything. One of the perks of being a village coordinator. Everybody know JEDCOM? You can go out and take 20 different genealogical programs and import your data in each one. Some programs have better reports, better perks than other programs. The last thing, I'll just read these off real quick. Proverbs. You get into this occupation as village coordinator, normally from general interest, family prodding, coercion, inquisitiveness, succession. You get out of it by senility, poverty, or death. You always think it's going to take a year or two to complete your research. After 3 decades, it's only one more. As you open one door, more pop up. The most interesting sources of data sometimes come from the most improbable places. Genealogy must be a passion to be executed, rain or shine, to be performed in sickness or in health till death. Like I said before, many requests for information turn out to be great sources of information. The minute you save your pennies for German church records from Russia, dollars are required. I don't think I need to go through anymore. That's about it as far as the presentation.
Thank you.
If anybody else wants more information, you have my business card. Just drop me a line. We can talk.
We very much appreciate Michael sharing his information and his experiences with us today. Thank you so very much for going to all the trouble to help us out. Before